feel like it's been forever since we've done this.
Y'all,
You think I'll
listen.
be
If
able to
there is
remember how
one
to
thing
do
I've
that?
learned, adversity does
Remember
not
how to
build
have a
character.
conversation with people
Adversity
listening
reveals
and
character.
watching.
I'm Barbie Bassett, and I invite you to join me and my friends, Therese, Apel, and Tracy Lee,
the hard
as
part.
we peel back those adversity
Feel like
layers to see what else is
Start over?
revealed.
Oh, you're hearing us talking? Oh, sorry.
Oops.
All right. So,
To be quiet during that?
yes.
Okay.
Start recording the mixer in 5, 4, 3.
Y'all, listen. If there is one thing I've learned, adversity does not build character. Adversity reveals character. I'm Barbie Bassett, and I invite you to join me and my friends, Therese Apel and Tracy Lee, as we peel back those adversity layers to see what else is revealed.
Well, welcome back to Y'all Listen Here. It's been a little bit since we've last spoken, and since you have last seen us, I am here with my good friend and sidekick, Therese Apel with Dark Horse Press. Say hey, Therese.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back.
Yes,
see
but
y'all.
we are missing our third angel, our
are.
third Charlie's angel, and that is Tracy Lee. She is out today, so we are without her. We're going to miss her presence today.
We really are. And also, like, she has that quick wit that I can't match. You know,
Yes.
it's like I can be funny if I have to think about it for a very long time first and come up with something. Then, like, I think this will be funny. And she can just do it. You know,
So hopefully we will get to see her again soon. She's kind of busy out and about. And of course, I know that you will miss her as well today, but she'll be back. Don't worry. She will be back. And we've got our man with the plan, Daniel Anderson with Audio Alchemy Productions. He is our producer and he is the extraordinaire producer. Right, Daniel?
he
Look
won't
at him.
say
He's
it,
just
but I will. He
smiling.
just smiles
He's just smiling.
until we
He
say
is
the
loving-
situation, the catastrophe, and,
and-
then he laughs.
And then he starts laughing.
right.
Yes, much to my expense, but that's okay.
It's okay.
It's all good.
It's okay.
See, there's that laugh that we know and that we love. Okay, so let's start out with our topic for the day.
Yeah.
I have not told you this,
Okay.
but I received a message from one of our listener viewers, and this person was talking about a really difficult time that they went through early in their marriage. So I'm going to estimate this has been about 30, maybe 45 years ago,
Sure.
in which they discovered that their spouse was having an affair with one of their close relatives. And this person shared how it's been so, I don't even know what other word that I could use besides difficult. It's just been hard to deal with the hurt that they have dealt with all of these years in knowing their feelings, knowing that the marriage ended up being dissolved over time, and how seeing this person over the years has not been the most pleasant. And so that kind of brought me to this question that this person was asking: how do you deal with the hurt of something happening to the point at it being so tragic? And how do you move on from that? And as Christians, that's hard. Kind of talked about this in the last
Absolutely.
episode, that we are taught to turn the other cheek and we're taught to forgive and forget, just forgive and forget. And then you smile and move on. But I thought about this person's story a lot over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know how I would feel.
I think it's important first to say that you don't have to forgive and forget on that. I mean, obviously, the biblical answer is eventually you do forgive, but that is devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's like the two people that are closest to you. And that's not something you just bounce back from. That's not something that it takes days or weeks or even months or years to get over. That kind of grief is something that you carry into probably every relationship you ever have, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or anything else, because how do you trust after something like that?
That seems like to be a situation where it has staying power.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, it stays with you. And then when you're talking about a previous spouse or an ex that you have children with, you've got to see them throughout the children's lives. And then when you see them out in public or you see the family member throughout the year, what's the first thing that you think about? You think about the hurt.
Right. Right. I think that's something that's, I mean, I told you when we walked in that this is going to be a very vulnerable topic for me. I have a lot of situations in my life that involve betrayal, and I'm a trusting person, and if I love you, well, then you have a very special place in my life. Like I definitely, build a little wall around the people that I love, and I'll fight to the death for them and all that kind of stuff. And it's hard to have a situation where you realize that that's not mutual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes again, that goes for relationships, but it also goes for friendships, and it goes for jobs sometimes. And not to get into any situations, but the hard part is there'll be a time that you're just busting your tail,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden you realize, like, no, I'm expendable. And again, that's any kind of relationship. The hard part, I think, the part where the grief can go away, but I think the part we're constantly, or maybe not go away, maybe the grief becomes bearable. But
Yeah.
the part that I'm constantly dealing with is, why wasn't I good enough? Those two
Ooh.
things go hand in hand. It's the rejection and the grief. And I think those two things, if you don't deal with them well, become bitterness and
Mhm.
become anger. And that's where I think the crux of what we're talking about is, how do you avoid that?
I don't know if you can avoid it. I mean, hurt is just going to be a part of living in a broken world to begin with. But how do you maneuver through that hurt to the point at which the hurt doesn't sting as much? I think it's so important, first of all, that we should say that neither one of us are licensed professional counselors.
Fair enough. Say that. Yeah.
Pretty obvious. But again, I go back to we're professional human beings, and we all have hearts, and we all have that tender part to us. And knowing when you're going through such a time where you've been hurt, it's almost like you want to sit there and you want to stay in it for as long as you possibly can because it hurts.
Mm-hmm. It's pressing on a bruise.
It's pressing on a bruise.
Mhm.
And at what point do you finally decide, it's time for me to get out of this? It's time for me to move on, or it's time for me to be the bigger person and move on from the hurt. And you've been very transparent in that you do seek help.
Yeah. If it wouldn't have been for my therapist, I've been in therapy now for the last 6 years,
Mhm.
and it deals with a lot of things that come from my job and everything else. But one thing that I've been able to take away from that is that there's a whole lot of people that have the exact same kind of feelings that I do. And so a lot of times when these things are so devastating, it's not like you make it smaller by saying, well, everybody feels that way. But knowing that this hurt that's been inflicted on you is not just something that has been done to you specifically, but that people do it to each other
Mhm.
across the board is incredibly helpful.
So let me ask you this question. As a Christian, as a believer, we're taught to, yes, turn the other cheek, but God is our refuge and he is our strength, and that is true. We know that is truth. But I think it's also hard for people to say, you know what, I'm not doing as well as I thought I would be by this point, and I think I need to get some help. I think I need to see a therapist. I think I need to see a counselor. And sometimes guilt comes in, shame comes in, like, well, why aren't I good enough on my own? Why aren't I a strong enough Christian? Is there a problem in my faith to where I don't have enough faith that God can help me get past this? Did you have any of those feelings?
So I didn't. And I have multiple thoughts on what you just said and I started smiling when you said that because I had an interesting conversation the other day. And we don't have to go into the weeds on this, and we don't want to, but I wish that when people say, oh, I don't go to the therapist, that people looked at them the same way they look at people who say, oh, I don't go to the OBGYN. Because both of those things are things you have to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to take care of these different pieces of your health.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like we seem to think that we're built to be strong enough to handle it. And especially as a first responder and working as a crime reporter, that was something that for years I just thought, well, I'm bulletproof. Somebody has to do this stuff and I'm strong enough to do it. So I'll do it. Well, most people are not. And what my
Mhm.
therapist has told me over and over again is that whether it's about the extreme stuff that I see or that a soldier or cop or whatever sees, or just the normal heartbreaks that people go through, it's it's trying to respond in a normal way to something that is not normal. And we're not cut out to do that. We have a set of responses to things that when they come, this is how we act. When somebody hurts you, you hurt.
Right.
You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to have these feelings. Um, I think that to me, one of the things that I have to remember is that I can allow the pain to be all that I am. And if I do that, that is all that I am. And that's what I put out front and that's what people see when I come and that's going to be the sum of everything. Or I can say right now I have this pain. It's not, I am hurting or I feel like I'm hurting is
Mhm.
kind of the difference. Um it's hard to draw that line when you're going through it, and it's okay to absolutely grieve in depth and to have those feelings, but at some point you do have to say, you know what, I follow a God whose heart gets broken by things we do every day.
True.
And do you know what he does every day? He wipes it away.
Mhm.
And so there's so much about forgiveness that comes out in this stuff, and it's not just forgiving others, it's forgiving ourselves too.
Yeah. Lauren just commented and she said, God puts people in your lives for moments like this. So true. And my
Mhm.
friend Lee, he's also doing the agree comment. I think back to, and I can't even remember who told me this in my life in the past from the standpoint of, you know what? God equips those people. God
Yep.
equips therapists and counselors to be able to help you get through those moments. As a Christian, I guess you could say our therapist, our counselor is the Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
because the Holy Spirit counsels us and shadows over us and is that third voice, if you will, that says, things
Yeah.
settle down, Barbie. Things are going to be just fine. You're going to make it. But it is so helpful when you have great friends like you and like Tracy. And of course, therapists along the way that help you through those difficult moments because you said it so beautifully. And I'm going to take what you said and change it just a little bit. You are hurt,
Mhm.
but you are not the hurt.
Right.
Does that make
Yes,
sense?
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the important thing is that, you either it goes back in a way to the same kind of thing as a fence.
Mhm.
If I hand you a cup of poison, are you going to drink it? The difference may be, if you're injected with poison and I can't find the right comparison really, but so you can choose not to be offended. You can't choose not to be hurt every time.
Yes.
Um, I think the thing is though, you have to allow, I'm going to grieve this and then I'm going to put my life back together. I think right now, of course, you and I have talked a lot, and Tracy, about dealing with our parents as they age.
Mhm.
Um, and you think about the things that go with that, and just the knowledge in the back of your head that is the pain that says one day they're not going to be here.
Right.
And every day you wake up with that. And every day you choose to put it away. But I think one of the things that we're given is this time with our parents when they're elderly so that we can kind of absorb that pain as it comes.
Mhm.
So when the time comes, then here is what's been expected. And I feel like with life, we go through it. We've been taught all these fairy tales that it's happy at the end, that good things happen to good people. There's all these different things. If you're loyal, somebody's loyal to you. I've been a good friend to you. What happened? Well, it's because everyone's not built like you. Everybody's heart's not like yours. But um, I feel like, and this is so funny. I know when I say this, I'm going to have some disagreements because I always do. But I think you have to feel the pain, move on, make space for it. I mean, if you need
Yeah.
to feel that pain forever, like your friend, I couldn't, that would be something I would always carry to an extent. But you can't hold that against everybody else. And when you think about being God, He loves us every day,
Mm.
regardless of what we did yesterday. So
Ooh.
with each new person that comes along and each new situation, it's hard to make the decision. I'm not going to hold yesterday's sins against me, against you.
Yeah.
And that is where I think I see when we talk about bitterness and grief in the people in my life that carry that bitterness, it just builds a wall between you and anybody else that wants to be in your life if you choose to hold that as something that you're not going to let go of.
Yeah. Lee just commented, says, I've learned it's okay to admit or say that I'm not okay. But then, you continue to move on. It's a matter of what's next.
Yeah.
And that is so true. It's so hard because you do want to stay in your feelings
Mm-hmm.
for a time. And it's also important for us to say that you don't know how long that time is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some people, I mean, I think about this person who reached out to me. It's probably been 30, maybe 40 years.
Yeah.
And they're still in their feelings over the hurt that has happened. And so at some point, you've kind of got to put on your big girl pants and say, how long am I going to allow this hurt to control my life and not impose it on other people? Because we've talked about this before too.
Right.
Many times when we get offended at something, it's because of an experience that we had
Yep.
in the past. So while we may be offended at something, other people may not be offended at all because they haven't had your same experience.
Sure.
Same thing goes with hurt. Something that may hurt you might not hurt me, Therese, because I have not had that experience. And why it's so important for us to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, and I want to draw another comparison. So when I first got into therapy for my PTSD, one of the things that I was really working with, I was dealing with a lot of addiction specialists because I had an eating disorder, a spin-off eating disorder. Some people with CPTSD get alcoholism or, have different things like that. Mine was eating. And one of the things that I talked to a nutritionist and I just said, well, the problem is I really like cupcakes. And I just use that as an example.
Yeah.
We're just talking about, I was just like, I really like cupcakes. And she goes, well, if you want a cupcake, eat a cupcake. If you want 2 cupcakes, eat 2 cupcakes, but don't eat 12 cupcakes and don't eat cupcakes forever. And I think that applies to hurt. If you need to hurt, hurt. If you need to hurt for days or weeks or months or years, do that. But don't make it everything and don't do it forever.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, too, you have to remember you're not alone. Psalm says it. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And I can't even say that verse without getting big tears in my eyes for all the times in my life I've had to go to it and just said, okay, I know that means you're sitting here with me. You saw what that person did. You saw how they betrayed my trust, how they threw away my loyalty, how they, stabbed me in the back. And you're not alone. And that understanding. And I think too, there's some emotion tied to the fact that it was my mom that started bringing that to me. And now you're going to cry too.
No,
anyway.
I'm going to cry too. But just in case my mama's watching, Mama, I'm fine. You have not done anything that has hurt me. I promise. Because Mama watches sometimes. So I just want to make sure that Mama's cool with that.
Well, and my mom didn't hurt me either, but she would send me that verse when I had something going
to
on,
remind you that God is so close and that he sees all and that he knows all.
Right. Well, and I think of a time I had gone through a really horrible breakup back in, it's been 12 years ago now. It feels like yesterday. I dated a guy for a year. The whole time I was sure he was the one. We just finished each other's sentences. That was the whole story. And he started to act a little squirrely, and that's okay. And he was a soldier, and so his thing was got a little bit of PTSD and need some space. And that was before my diagnosis. But I've known so many people who dealt with it. So I was like, take your space, man. It's cool. So during that time, I'm convinced he's coming back. We're getting back together. And then one day my roommate comes in and says, I need you to sit down. And I said, okay, what's up? And I sat down and she said, he's getting married tomorrow. And he and I were still in contact every day. We were still very much, in my mind, we were still a thing. So I, of course, immediately tried to contact him. I immediately was trying to what's going on? Hold on. What? Wait, hold on. And he had been seeing her the whole time we were together.
Girl, stop. This is turning into a soap opera.
Oh, it was a soap opera. And I mean, if I could, I don't have time for the whole thing.
Oh, my goodness.
So anyway, and he had done these brazen things like propose to her in front of all of her coworkers, and somehow I hadn't heard about it. How does that happen in Brandon, Mississippi? But long story short, it was I remember dealing with all the facets of that.
Yeah.
It wasn't just now I've lost this person that I loved, that I thought was my soulmate, that I thought was one of my best friends, that all these different things. He was my everyday. I woke up. I was going to the gym because I wanted him to be impressed with me when he was done having his PTSD problem, whatever. Everything was about him. And so I had to stop and I had to go back to God and say, wait a minute. First of all, where were my priorities? I was definitely allowing him to be an idol. But secondly, I remember there was a night that I was laying on the floor with my face in the rug, sobbing, and just coming undone.
Mm-hmm.
Just God, how this means that I'm everything awful. If somebody that I love that much could reject me on all those levels and do all those things and lie to me in so many ways and all the betrayal, then what does that mean? And he sent me to the book of Job and to this, this place where Job is sitting there and everything horrible is happening to him. And all his friends are like, why don't you, and we've talked about it, why don't you just kill yourself and, curse God?
Right.
And I just thought, no, you know what? If I can love somebody like that and feel I believed he loved me the same way I loved him, then imagine what it's like when the right thing comes along. And maybe that's about a job. Maybe that's about a relationship. Maybe that's about, your children or your parents or whoever it is that hurts you. But for me, that took years to get past.
Yeah. Well, you know what Daniel's sitting here thinking, right?
What's that?
Daniel wants to know what his name is.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm happy to give out
I
his.
think that's Tracy. It's not me.
Oh, yeah. Tracy's the one that swings on me.
What? Tracy is bombing the
I think so.
Is she? Oh.
I thought it was you.
Oh, that's Tracy. Oh, my gosh. I didn't see that.
Oh, Tracy. Tracy's getting messy.
Tracy, we'll talk.
At our next luncheon together.
Right. Oh, yes.
We'll divulge all the scoop. No, I think we've all been there. We've had those instances. The Bible calls it a root of bitterness. Because at some point, if you don't take care of it, it does begin to control all of your thoughts, all of your emotions.
She thought it was on her account.
Y'all see this going on live, don't you, in the chat?
Yeah, we're talking about what's happening in the chat. There.
Yeah. Tracy says, "Oops, she thought it was on her account." Okay, Tracy, but now we know where you are, Tracy.
Right.
We'll get you next time.
And there's my friend Rashonda. Good thing we serve a God that is able to do all things, and that is the truth. He is the great healer.
Preach that.
And Rashonda has some stories of her own. I'd love for us to talk to her one day too.
Absolutely. Because we've all encountered those people who you can tell they've had a lot of hurt in their life.
Oh, yeah.
In how they respond to you, how they respond to me, how they respond to whatever's going on. And let's be honest, when we are hurt, we respond in hurt. When we are offended, we respond in offense. And you never know what someone has gone through. And I try to show as much grace as I possibly can when I encounter somebody who is prickly, if you will, in whatever way. And I think, I don't know what's going on with them. Something must have happened earlier in their day. And I try to extend that grace thinking it's okay. They're just having a bad day. But if you don't get rid of that bad day, that's when it becomes the root of bitterness. I think about, and Tracy, I grew up in the country. I grew up on the farm, and I know, y'all, it was the 80s and the 90s. I get it. But my daddy had my siblings and we chopped cotton. We chopped, by the time I came along a little bit later, Daddy got out of doing cotton and he focused mostly on soybeans and milo. Milo is a grain or a barley. It's a member of the barley grain family. And every summer, that's what I did, is I chopped soybeans or milo, maybe cotton if he was coming out of that phase. And there were times in the summers when I wanted to be at Enid Lake or Sardis Lake or Grenada Lake doing what all my friends were, but Daddy had me do that every summer. I know now why he wanted me to do that, so that way I would grow up, get an education, and leave. But back then, I hated it, especially in the Mississippi summer. Here's the truth. We had plows. He had plows. He had discs that could have easily taken care of that. However, anything about crops, many times roots, weeds will grow up right next to the stalk. Well, if a plow is or a disc is going down the center of the aisle, which it is, it can't get right next to that beanstalk or right next to that Milo stalk. And what you have to do, if you're not really good with the hoe, and I wasn't the best with the hoe, but if you're not good with the hoe, you have to squat down. You have to bend down. You have to take extra effort.
Mm-hmm.
And what teenager wants to do extra effort?
No.
But you had to do extra effort to bend down and pull up that weed. Now, if you pull a weed at the top, guess what's still left? The root. So when you pulled the weed, you had to get closer towards the ground, closer towards the dirt, and put a little bit of pressure on it, pinch it really good, and pull it out. That way you could typically get the root out while you were getting the weed out. And then there are some weeds that are out there, some thistles and burrs that they produce other burrs and thistles. And if you did not get rid of that weed, then the seeds are kind of like a dandelion seeds.
Mhm.
They would spread and they produce other weeds.
Yep.
And I relate so much to that just from my upbringing there on the farm, in that getting rid of a root of bitterness or getting rid of hurt takes effort.
Right. Well, and I think so. One of the things that I feel like is the most important part is, and you can think of it in terms of like a meat tenderizer or something like that. A lot of times, as these things hurt you, as they continue to hurt you, what you don't understand is that God is giving you those situations, that pain, not just so you can help others, but to make you a different kind of person.
Ooh, that's so true.
Because the people that I know that are the most beautiful people, you know, that have the best hearts, that love the most, that reach out the most in people's times of need, that are the most empathetic, that are the most loving, those are the ones that have been hurt the most.
Yeah.
And I think it's because instead of choosing bitterness, instead of choosing to become hard, they choose to be vulnerable. They choose to be soft. That is nothing but surrender.
Mm-hmm.
That is just, you know what? I'm going to keep getting hurt. There is not one thing I can do about it but go home, lay my head on God's lap, and say, I can't do this by myself
Yeah.
every day.
So
You know.
true. I think about the scripture. In fact, I've got it here on my phone. Let me pull it up because I was thinking on it today. Psalm 103:12. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. So we hear the phrase forgive and forget.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sorry. That is nowhere in the scripture.
Right.
It says that he forgives and he forgets, that he throws our transgressions, he throws our shortcomings, he throws our sins as far as from the east is from the west. We can't do that. We are not God. And because of that, I have over the years had to say, okay, God, I've forgiven them, but you got to help me forget the hurt that they caused or that this situation caused. And I want to tell you, it's truly like he has answered those prayers over the years, because there are situations that I look back on and I remember that happened and I remember that happened. But if you were to ask me, well, tell me about that. Like, what were the details surrounding that? I can honestly tell you, I don't remember. I just remember, a situation happened, but I don't remember the specifics because, when you're truly hurt, when you're mad, when you're offended, well, you can remember everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can remember it all. And I can look back and say, I don't remember specifically what happened. I know that something happened and I was deeply hurt about that. But that's how I've had to go through my life is, Lord, take away the hurt. I mean, I've forgiven them, but take away the hurt, take away the sting that you have when their name is mentioned
Oh,
or
yeah.
when you see them in the Walmart aisle. Do you find yourself having to do that?
Oh, yeah. Well, and not so much at this point in my life, but I can think of people in my life that when I heard their very name or when I saw someone that looked like them or what, and I mean, I say not at this point in my life. I mean, as much as 2 years ago, there was
Yeah.
somebody like that. And what's funny is I ended up at some point coming to a place where I recognized what it was that I had a problem with. And we had, been through a situation that had placed us at odds and whatnot. But once I was able to put some of that away and say, what I'm feeling here is very normal and very human. But the thing is, it is human. And we're not here to act like people, even though we are. We're here to every day make the decision to try and look like Christ. And I'm not good at that. I'm
Mhm.
not. But there are things that he's been teaching me at this stage of my life about like, okay, well, the thing is, we're all stuck on this planet together and we're all going to bump up against each other sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, to just be able to say, you know what, when you look at Jesus, it wasn't just like there were people that like wrote bad stuff about him on Facebook or whatever the equivalent was back then.
Yes.
Or, that would say, I disagree with what he's saying, or that would say, I think you're a false prophet, or that's fake news, or enemy of the people, whatever. But the people that were supposed to be his own are the ones that took him and put him to death. It was
Mhm.
a whole crowd of people that he had ministered to for years that were screaming, give us Barabbas. And so if he can go through every day of his life, and he had something we didn't, he knew what was going to happen. So he's looking people in the face going, I know that you're going to betray me.
Yeah.
I know that you're going to chant Barabbas whenever that day comes. I know that you're the Pharisee that's going to bring this in front of the Sanhedrin, that kind of thing. And he still loved.
Mhm.
And I feel like as much as that makes you vulnerable and the world calls you soft and they tell you you're pathetic and they tell you all these things about yourself, there's a difference between being pathetic and being unable to move on. And finding that place where you say, in God's love for you, I forgive you. I understand that you will still be in my life, and I choose to let this go.
Yeah.
There is a difference, and it may change the dynamic of the relationship or it may not. But the fact is, we live in a world that tells you you can't do that. You have to be the bigger person. You have to go with the bigger person, and you have to
Right.
go on. It doesn't, that's not what Christ modeled for us. It's individual, it's each situation. A lot of it, your witness to that person is grace, a lot of times.
So true. Charlotte just said, good talk today.
Mhm.
And, that's what we want to continue to do. We want to continue to talk about the things that we're going through, that we're dealing with, have dealt with, and hope that it gives you a little bit of encouragement throughout your day. And because of that, we have people who make this possible. They make this podcast
That's right.
possible.
That's right. We are grateful for our friends at Complete Exteriors. These guys are, now they're here in our community. Complete Exteriors is here in Pearl. They also have one on the coast. They also service Hattiesburg. You can call them for a free estimate. They do roofing. And when I tell you the good thing about them being local is these are people that you know. They're people in your community. They're just like us. And you might run into them in the grocery store. So they're going to do a good job, not just because that's what they do, but also because they're accountable to you. They're your neighbor. They've been members of our community ever since 2007. And they are your hometown roofing contractor for all residential and commercial roof issues. So whatever you've got going on, call them at 601-326-2755. Or you can go to the website. That's completeexteriorsms.com.
And don't you know those guys and girls have been busy
Oh, yeah.
with the hurricanes that we've had, and we're still in hurricane season, friends. That does not end until November the 30th.
That's right.
So give Complete Exteriors a call. We love them.
We do.
We love
them
them.
so much.
And we appreciate them for making this podcast possible for us. So that brings me to the next thing. Should you have a business that you want us to give a shout out to, be sure to contact us, and we'll be happy to make them a part of the podcast as well. I was looking at 1 Corinthians 13, 4-5. We call it the love chapter.
Yep.
And sometimes I'm just not feeling the love.
Right.
But this one in particular says, love's patient, love's kind, love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful.
Mhm.
And when you have that bitterness, when you have that root of bitterness, that's where the resentment comes from. That's where the boastfulness comes in, where I don't have to forgive them. They were wrong. We all know they're wrong. I should not have to forgive. But if we don't have the love of the Lord in our hearts, we're not going to forgive. We're not going to love. Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything. Think about this. When you are hurt,
Oh yeah, it obsesses you.
oh
You
my
become
goodness,
obsessed. Yeah.
talk about anxiety, talk about worry. But Paul says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication. So, in other words, we're asking for the Lord's help. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Philippians 4:6. And I know that if Tracy were here right now, Tracy would say at this part where it says, let your requests be made known to God, Tracy would tell God all about it.
Yeah. Oh, she would tattle. Yeah.
She would totally tattle, and she's
Yeah.
admitted to tattling just in case she's watching us
Right.
again. Colossians 3:2, we should set our minds on things above, not on earthly things. But when you're hurting,
Yeah.
it is hard to set your mind on things of the Lord because we're here in our feelings. And so I have to remind myself when I'm going through the hurt that I need to not put my eyes on myself, but Lord, how would you want me to respond? Sweet Nancy, I really needed to hear this story. Y'all made me see my past pain and how I still carry it through different eyes. Nancy, you are not alone.
Nope. Not at
My
all.
goodness, you're not alone.
Well, and I think the hard part is, so to go back to 1 Corinthians 13, verse 5 says, love keeps no record of wrongs.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times I've had to go to that and be like, God, what? I mean, but what do you mean by that? Like,
Yeah.
when you say no record of wrongs,
Can you break it down just a little bit
Right.
more for us?
right, that sounds like you're saying forgive and forget.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, the world says don't forget. Don't forget. I believe, though, and again, I recognize what a lot of people think about this, but I believe I don't have to necessarily keep you in my life if you have a track record of doing bad things to me. But on the other hand, it is my job to accept that hurt that you've given me, take it to the throne, set it down, and say, I don't want to deal with this by myself. It may be a thorn in my side. It
Mhm.
may be a wound that I have to heal from, but give it to God. Let Him determine the days.
Yes.
And you walk away with your head held high because you didn't ask for that. You didn't bring that on yourself, but God allowed it to happen for a very specific reason.
Mhm.
And we're to keep no record of wrong.
That's right.
And that is so hard. But I think the thing is, I've found, and I'm not pretending like I'm doing it right. It's so hard to talk about this because you don't want to sound like, if you want to be like me,
Yes.
But one thing that has really released me from a lot of things is being able to look at someone and imagine their side. And even if it is just they don't understand the God that I serve, they don't love a God who loves them back absolutely with no reserve. So, of course, they don't know not to do that to me. Of course, they don't know that what they're doing hurts them. The old cliche hurts them worse than it hurts me. It hurts me. It does. But on the other hand, like, I'm not the one who has to deal with the conscience of that.
Right. Right. I think how I've had to deal with it in my own life, like for the last year and a half or so, is it's kind of funny. But I'm like, God, did you see that? Did you hear that? Did you hear what they just said about me, or did you hear that comment, or did you read what they just sent me right here? You handle it. And literally, like you just said,
Mhm.
leave it at the throne of the Father because he saw it. He doesn't need me reminding him
Mm-hmm.
or checking up on him to make sure that he saw it.
Well, and Rashonda has their vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And I have to go back, and we talked about it early on in this podcast, but I have to go back to the fact that our God sent some bears to eat some teenagers
Yes.
that were making fun of his prophet's bald head.
Yes. And
So-
opened up the earth
Oh, yeah.
and swallowed.
Swallowed people.
Yeah.
Yeah, sit down fire. I
Mhm.
mean, God has a very strong sense of, what did you do to my person?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't give him enough credit because sometimes we think that because I've had to wait this long, there's not going to be an answer.
Yeah.
Like, but when are you coming, God? When? Well, you got to remember that in our time, I mean, it may be 40 years until that person serves their time, but God has been making it perfect so that by the end, when they get eaten by that bear, that's exactly the bear they didn't want to get eaten by.
He sees it, he knows it,
Mm-hmm.
he watches it all, and he keeps a record of it all. But at the same time, I have to turn that introspectively to myself and say, Lord, help me not to be the one causing a root of bitterness in someone else's heart or in their mind. What are your last thoughts for today?
Gosh, my last thought is the best thing you can do is forgive and forget. The best thing you can do is just trust God to take that wound and heal it and to deal with the person who inflicted it, because it's that softness and that vulnerability that allows you to show his love to others.
Yeah. I don't want to be one of those thistles, one of those weeds, one of those burrs that, oh my goodness. And in the summertime, if you walked outside in the yard barefooted,
Oh, yeah.
oh my word, I don't want to be one of those that causes it to spread and has other seeds to where that bitterness, that unforgiveness takes root in multiple people's yards.
Right.
And their yards is their heart and in their spirit. So I'm reminding myself as I'm trying to encourage all of our listeners and our viewers that sometimes I'm going to have to bend down, I'm going to have to squat down, I'm going to have to put in the effort to reach down and pull up that weed by the root and set it aside. Because once it's pulled up and it's no longer in the ground, it's not getting watered anymore, it's not getting nutrients anymore from the ground, and it's not growing, it withers and it dies. And gosh, I'm just having to remind myself of that.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I kind of want to bring back out is remember that if you're doing hurting as well, you kind of can't ask for mercy until you've asked for forgiveness.
So true.
So, as a first responder, one of my favorite sayings is do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I feel like as we go through our lives, if we want to be able to move past our hurts, we've got to make sure that we're not the one, like you said, inflicting the hurts.
So true. Antoinette, thank you for that. She says this is so timely, relatable, and that's what we're here for. So we appreciate all of you being with us today and listening, and we can't wait to see you and to share with you again on the next episode of Y'all Listen Here.
It's a brand new